Dear Lisa, when there is suffering, deep suffering, trauma releasing and healing, what would be your advice to support the healing and also use it for one's own awakening? It would be nice to speak with you live. Thank you. Sure, we can speak live. I think I've spoken to you before, but I've forgotten your name. Spelia, it says. Well, Spelia, okay, so you've not called, but I'll just answer your question. So, whose trauma is it that you're healing? We think that so these bodies get traumatized, so, okay, there's Spelia. Hey, Spelia, is that how you say your name? I forgot. Spila.
Yes.
I'm really bad at pronunciation of names.
No problem.
So thanks for your question. I just started answering actually. I wasn't sure if you were going to call. So the question is whose trauma do you think it is? And I'm not saying that we don't heal the trauma. Like everybody, not that that is somebody, but everybody is traumatized. Like Khaleesi is traumatized as much as the humans. Although she's got a pretty good life, but there's some things that traumatize her, like sometimes other dogs. And when she was in Thailand, I actually have a little bit of a racist dog against Thai people, because when I was in Thailand, sometimes the Thai people used to beat her. And so now, even when she sees a Thai person, I don't know how she notices, but she knows. She starts to growl or bark at them. And so to Khaleesi, though, she doesn't suffer. And I'm not suggesting don't try to get over that trauma. It's so much more beautiful if you can get over it. I don't know how I break that one in Khaleesi, but it's really beautiful to let these traumas go. But when we're awakening, we get confused because there's so much suffering around the traumas. So say if you've been beaten when you were a child by men, and so therefore it makes relationships with men very difficult. So when you try to have an intimate relationship with a man, there is a lot of fear that comes up. Sorry, I've got lots of dog hairs on my face now. I'm just going. And then because you feel like you're a person and you can feel like Khaleesi, she can't see her trauma. So if she's living with a Thai person and feeling lots of fear and anxiety, she can't know that she's feeling that. There is just sensation arising. But this separate entity sees its trauma and it thinks my unhappiness, my unenlightenment is my trauma. But that's not actually the case. It's just that there is lots of rejection around that trauma, so you suffer more with the trauma as opposed to being happy. When you're happy, there's not a rejection of that happiness. There's not someone there going, I don't want to be happy, let's avoid this, let's get out of this situation. You're just like, woohoo, I'm happy. But so with the trauma, we suck it in and we want to reject it. We want that to go away, and we push it away. And actually the pushing away of it by the person encourages it. It makes it stay right away. Because with Khaleesi, if she's traumatized with something, so say if there's a Thai person that she's traumatized by, I just would turn her body around and she's forgotten it. She's not holding on to it. She's just like, There's just a simplicity there because she hasn't got the complicated thinking and she doesn't have an identity. She's not holding on to it and making it personal. She's not victim to the Thai person. It's simply an expression of fear when she sees that, and then that fear is gone when that input isn't there anymore. The human, though, holds on to it and gets into crazy thoughts about it. It begins to believe that it's unworthy, that it produced this trauma, it's its fault. Like Khaleesi doesn't think it's her fault or anything, and that you're a victim to that trauma, that trauma is hurting you, and that you're victim to something external to you. Khaleesi doesn't see herself victim to anything. There is just sensation happening, there is fear happening, but there's not her there that's victim to the fear. There is simply a sensation that passes through. And this is the healthy way to actually experience trauma, is that sensation comes up, it's really intense, and it just passes through. The human feels like in some way that it's their fault.
Yeah.
And it claims that trauma, and it feels victim to the external. this person has done this to me, and then it makes up lots of stories about what this person did to it, and it holds it all into the body, and these traumas can go on for years. So seeing someone that hurt you as a child can then affect you for months afterwards. You can feel shaky and nervous about it, and there's a repetition, an obsession about it, about being victim to this person. But when that attention changes from being that person with trauma to just the aliveness, there's nothing external which traumatizes you, because you don't feel like this body anymore. The fear of that body and that body are one and the same thing. There isn't somebody that has fear in relationship to another person. There is simply fear that arises, and there's nothing which is victim to that fear. And that fear is a very natural response that appears, and it appears very intensely and then disappears. And in a way, that's its freedom. That's the healthy way to experience life. And in a way, that's letting the trauma go. The person's holding on to trauma. So the problem's never the trauma themselves, the problem is always the person. But these things are really intense, and the person gets into really negative ways of dealing with life. People hold grudges and very negative thought patterns around certain people or certain events. And so when you feel like a separate person, I would suggest and recommend always exploring the physical sensations. The physical sensations are much more important than the thoughts, because everything you think is kind of a craziness and not true. Our thinking is always bound to opposites, good and bad. So they did something bad to me, and this is actually a really simplistic way of thinking, even though we think that it has some intelligence. To think that there's something bad is if you really look at it, it's a really crazy assumption, because when does an action start and stop? So when did badness start and stop? So somebody's action, when does it begin? And when does it end? Really, life is an endless flow of energy that started at the Big Bang and is a carry-on expression of that. So something that which we describe as bad is actually an appearance of that one divine energy that's expressing itself in this way. And you can't really describe things as good and bad. We can only describe them as good and bad as a way in order to manipulate our environment and improve our environment. It's not actually a reality. So our thinking process is a really incorrect way to see life. So I would always, you feel separate, bring the attention down to the actual physical sensations that are appearing in the body, and not give too much attention to what actually being thought about. Or if it's too strong, the thinking, then explore the thoughts and try to push the thoughts to the limit. So if you're experiencing a lot of hate to someone, try and push that to the limit, to see that hate and expose it for what it is, rather than hiding from the hate. So sometimes when we hate something, we try to push that hate feeling away, and we try to tell positive stories, or we say, instead of admitting that we hate someone, we try to rationalize it by actions that they've done that annoy us. And we try to make it valid what we're feeling. And rather than just staying in that, explore what you're thinking, or more importantly, what you're feeling. Because really underneath the hatred that we feel for someone, really what we're actually feeling is an intense vulnerability. There's really... Hate is like a very surface thing to cover up vulnerability. We use it as a defense. And really what the two core feelings are as soon as separation begins is, I'm afraid of life, I'm this small object that's afraid, and we hate in order to feel more powerful, to not feel so afraid, so it helps us to survive, but it's actually not a true feeling. So we feel afraid, and we feel not enough, that we lack. So underneath all these stories that we're telling, it's like a complicated system that's on top and trying to cover up what's truly being felt. And really what we feel is this separation, and from this separation we feel lack and fear. And then we tell these hate stories in order to try and make us feel less fear. We try to stay in that to make us feel more powerful or less lack. that this person did this to me, but actually what it does is it makes us very weak, and it makes us sick and ill. This compulsion of going into what we tell ourselves. What we tell ourselves is always trying to make us feel more powerful and feel less vulnerable to life, but it cuts us off and deadens us and makes us ill and small. Someone filled with hate is so weak. But they're screaming and shouting like a dog, like a vicious dog that's trying to say, trying to be less vulnerable to its environment.
Yeah.
So my advice when you feel separate and when you feel these intense energies coming up is to explore it. Is to, rather than staying in the compulsive thinking, to explore what's being thought. So if you're feeling hate, I can guarantee it's coming from lack and fear. So exploring that hate, or exploring that intense sensation in the body, because really there isn't an inside body and an outside world. There is sensation that's happening that never ends. You don't actually feel things inside your body, it's everything feeling sensation. So if there is an intense feeling of anger, in a way you could say that everything's anger, because you'll begin to discover that that anger isn't separate from all things. There isn't somebody that has anger. There is awakeness that's experiencing it all. And that awakeness, that knowing, that consciousness, doesn't start or stop anywhere, and it's conscious of everything, whether it be anger or love. And that anger or love belongs to no one. You might have to watch this back.
Yeah.
I'm like a, pop, 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 pop. But you might be following my energy more than what I'm saying.
I love it.
The great thing about the human instrument is its ability to explore, its creative ability. We're so creative as humans, and we get stuck in such dogmatic views and opinions. Even non-duality, in a way, needs to be chucked out. Everything that's ever said or spoken about the subject needs to be ripped to shreds and chucked away, because there's nothing which is true. There is this innocence that's experiencing itself as everything. And it's looking through this body, it's looking through your body, it's looking through this body, my body. It's looking through all these bodies at itself. So this sound of my voice is a reflection of that which is listening, that which is actually hearing, which isn't you, it is that boundlessness. Oh, that was really beautiful, that conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, with pleasure. Even though it was me mostly speaking, it's not. It's like an energy flow.
Very beautiful. Wow.
Oh, thank you. Lovely to speak with you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye. You see, it looks like I'm speaking, but it's yourself speaking as that awakeness. So even though it's a conversation of one, so it's awakeness watching from all different angles, it appears as if it's two, but those two aren't two. I can't say that. Hey Nick! Hey Jessie. Oh, internet is screwing on your end. I don't think it's my end. I'm near London, so should have really strong internet. But yesterday, actually, the internet kept going down. But that was because we had too many boxes in the house. Confusing.